Welcome back to Atlina's Romantasy Collection. To my loyal pack, it is so good to see you again, and to my new listeners, prepare yourself because you just found your new obsession. Imagine a world where the sun screams, dust is your only companion, and your life is worth exactly 1 gallon of dirty water. That was Romy's reality. She stood on the auction block, waiting to be sold to a monster, but instead, she got a warlord. Alpha Danton didn't just buy her. He walked up to that stage, looked into her soul with glowing silver eyes, and uncapped a gallon of priceless, crystal-clear glacial water. And then? He poured it into the burning sand. He watched it sizzle and evaporate just to tell her one thing. You think you want water? No, little stray. You're thirstier than that. If that level of audacity gives you chills, you are in the right place. Do not let this story slip through your fingers. Smash that like button, subscribe to join our survival squad, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a beat of the heat. And I want to know where my pack is hiding. Drop a comment down below and tell me, where in the world are you listening from right now? Let's see which country has the strongest thirst. Now, let's enter the scorch. Chapter 1. The Price of Dust. The sun in Sector 4 didn't shine, it screamed. It was a hateful, bloated orange eye that stared down at us, daring anything wet to exist. I wiped a layer of gray grit from my forehead, checking the moisture seal on my goggles. It was blinking red, critically low, just like my bank account, my patience, and my saliva production. Rex, quit eating the insulation, I hissed, swatting at the black feathers perched on my shoulder. Rex, my crow, and the only male in my life who hadn't tried to sell me or kill me, let out a defiant caw. He hopped from my shoulder to the rusted skeleton of the old ventilation shaft we were stripping for copper. He tilted his head, his beady eye gleaming with intelligence that unsettled most people. Shiny, Rex croaked, dropping a piece of copper wire into my palm. Good boy, I whispered, scratching the spot where his feathers met his beak. I found him 3 years ago in a burn pit, a singed ball of fluff chirping at a pack of jackals. He was missing a tail feather, and I was missing a reason to care, so we teamed up. Now, he was the best scout in the scorch. Romy, a voice rasped from below. Moisture marshals, 6 o'clock. They're checking biotags. I looked down. Zola was crouched in the shadow of a crushed billboard, her face wrapped in linen to keep the evaporation down. We weren't blood sisters. Blood was too expensive to share, but we were dustkin. We'd survived the Great Dry together since we were 12. We need to move, I signaled, sliding down the rust-slicked pipe. We need a miracle, Romy, Zola muttered, clutching her filtration mask. I'm 3 liters in debt. If they scan me, I'm getting sent to the leach fields. Look at me, I grabbed her shoulders. Her eyes were terrified, wide and pale brown like dried mud. What's the rule? Salt in the wound, she recited, her voice trembling. Water in the blood, I finished, locking eyes with her. We don't dry out. We don't crack. We survive. Survive! Survive! Rex squawked, flapping his wings aggressively. But the universe, as usual, had a wicked sense of humor. A heavy, mechanized boot slammed onto the metal grating above us. We froze. I looked up to see the ugly, filtered snout of a marshal's helmet peering down. Well, well, the marshal grunted, his voice amplified by a speaker. 2 little dust rats and a chicken. Looks like my quota just got filled. The auction block smelled like ozone, unwashed bodies, and fear. They didn't bind our hands with rope. Rope was organic and rare. They used zip ties made of recycled plastic that bit into my wrists. I stood in a line of 20 other debtors, all of us waiting to be sold to the highest bidder to pay off our water taxes. Zola was 3 spots down. She was shaking. I wanted to scream, to fight, but fighting cost hydration. So I stood still, letting Rex, who had refused to fly away and was currently digging his talons into the marshal's shoulder, cause chaos. Get this flying rat off me, the marshal shouted, swatting at the bird. Rex dodged with the grace of a fighter pilot, landing on my head and pecking at my messy, ash-blonde hair affectionately. Ugly! Ugly! He screamed at the marshal. He's a critic, I muttered, my voice raspy. He doesn't like your helmet. Tacky design. The marshal glared at me. Shut it, 734. You're up. He shoved me onto the platform. The sun hit me instantly, a heavy blanket of heat that made my vision swim. I looked out at the crowd. It was a sea of rags and desperation. But in the front row, seated on actual chairs under a UV-blocking canopy, were the hydrated. You could tell who they were by their skin. It wasn't cracked. It wasn't gray. It was flush, pink, and smooth. They held bottles of water, actual liquid water, in their hands, sipping it casually while people around them looked ready to murder for a drop. Lot 734, the auctioneer boomed. Female, 21. Dormant genetics. Low muscle mass, but teeth are intact. Starting bid is 2 liters of gray water. 2 liters of dirty water. That was what my life was worth. A toilet flush. 3 liters, shouted a fat man who ran a rendering plant. 4, yelled a brothel keeper with a mechanical eye. I felt a surge of nausea. I looked at Zola. She was crying silently. If we were sold to different masters, I'd never see her again. 4 liters going once! Suddenly, the air in the square changed. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure. The hair on my arms stood up. Rex stopped preening and went rigid, his talons digging into my scalp. Danger, he croaked, low and guttural. Big danger. The crowd parted, not out of politeness, but out of terror. A vehicle rolled into the square. It wasn't a rusted scrap heap like the others. It was a matte black, armored behemoth, sleek and terrifying. The door hissed open. A boot hit the sand. Size 15, easy. Alpha Danton stepped out. I'd heard the stories. The warlord of the Northern Aquifer. They said he had so much water he bathed in it. They said he was a lichen so powerful his mere presence could force a dormant wolf to submit. He was massive. He didn't just take up space, he conquered it. He wore black tactical gear that absorbed the light, making him look like a shadow cut from the void. His hair was dark, shaved on the sides, and his skin was tan, healthy, and radiated a heat that had nothing to do with the sun. He walked toward the stage, ignoring the bowing crowd. His eyes were hidden behind black tactical shades, but I felt them. I felt them slide over the crowd and lock onto me like a laser guidance system. The auctioneer started sweating profusely. Alpha Danton, we didn't expect— Quiet, Danton said. His voice wasn't loud. It was deep, like the rumble of an earthquake miles below the surface. It vibrated in my chest cavity. He stopped at the base of the stage. He slowly took off his sunglasses. His eyes were silver. Not gray, silver, molten, metallic, and predator sharp. He looked at me, taking in my dirty rags, my scuffed boots, and the crow nesting in my hair. He didn't look disgusted. He looked hungry, but not for food. How much for the girl? He asked. The auctioneer swallowed. Current bid is 4 liters of gray water, my lord. Danton reached into his belt. He didn't pull out a credit chip. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a jug. A clear, 1-gallon jug. Condensation dripped down the sides. Condensation. It was cold. Inside, the liquid sloshed. Crystal clear, pure, terrified perfection. It was glacial grade. 1 sip could heal a sickness. A gallon could buy a city block. The crowd went silent. Absolutely dead silent. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Zola gasped. 1 gallon, Danton said, his voice bored. Clean, cold, unfiltered. He tossed the jug onto the stage. It landed with a heavy thud at my feet. The auctioneer looked like he was going to have a stroke. Sold! Sold to Alpha Danton for— Wait, I croaked. I didn't mean to speak. It was suicide to speak to an alpha, but I stared at that jug. It was my freedom. It was my life. Danton looked up at me, one eyebrow raised. Did you say something, little stray? Why? I managed to rasp, my throat clicking. I'm not worth that. Nobody is. Danton smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile a wolf gives a lamb before it tears the throat out. He stepped up onto the stage. He towered over me, blocking out the sun. He smelled like rain. He smelled like a storm crashing into a pine forest. My knees buckled, my instincts screaming at me to roll over and show my belly. I bit my tongue until I tasted copper to stay standing. Salt in the wound. He reached down and picked up the jug. The plastic crunched in his large hand. "You think this is what you're worth?" he asked softly. He unscrewed the cap. The sound cracked through the silent square. "No," I whispered, realizing what he was doing. "Don't." He locked eyes with me, his silver irises burning. And then he tipped his hand. Splash! The water hit the dirty, scorching wooden planks. It sizzled. It soaked into the dry rot instantly. A gallon of pure life, gone in 3 seconds. The crowd screamed. A collective wail of horror. People fell to their knees. Zola covered her mouth. I stared at the dark, wet stain spreading between his boots and mine. My brain couldn't process it. He had just burned a fortune. He had just killed us all a little bit. "You monster," I breathed, looking up at him. "Why?" Danton leaned down. He got close, so close I could feel the heat radiating off his chest. He reached out, his thumb brushing the line of my jaw, rough and calloused. "Because you were looking at the bottle, Romy," he rumbled, his voice dropping to a growl that only I could hear. "And I need you looking at me." He inhaled sharply, his nostrils flaring as he took in my scent. "That water was dead," he whispered against my ear. "You—" His hand tightened on my chin, forcing me to look into that molten silver gaze. "You are thirstier than that." Rex let out a confused squawk. Danton straightened up, grabbing my arm. "Come, we have work to do." As he dragged me toward the armored truck, leaving the wet spot drying on the stage, I realized one terrifying thing. He wasn't wrong. Chapter 2. The Black Cab. Danton threw me into the passenger seat of his armored transport. The interior smelled of expensive leather, gun oil, and recycled peppermint air. It was a cold, alien scent compared to the rot of the market. "Zola!" I screamed, twisting in the seat as the door slammed shut. "You can't just leave her!" I saw her through the reinforced window, a small figure in a yellow scarf, being dragged toward a different transport truck by a slaver. She looked back at me, her eyes wide with terror. "My sister!" I clawed at the door handle. "Let me out!" "She's gone," Danton said, climbing into the driver's seat. He didn't even look at me. He started the engine, the massive machine rumbling to life beneath us. Suddenly, a black missile slammed into the windshield. Thud, scratch, caw! It was Rex. The crow was beating his wings against the glass, screaming in a language only I understood. "Trapped! Trapped! Open!" "Get that rat off my truck," Danton growled, reaching for the wiper fluid. "Don't you dare!" I lunged across the console, grabbing Danton's wrist. His skin was shockingly hot, like touching a fever victim. "He's not a rat. He's my partner. Let him in." Danton looked at my hand on his wrist. His silver eyes narrowed. "You have 3 seconds to let go before I break your fingers." "Let him in," I hissed, not backing down, or I screamed the entire way to Sector 4. Danton stared at me. Then he hit the window release. The glass slid down with a hum. Rex tumbled into the cab, a flurry of black feathers and righteous indignation. He landed on my lap, his chest heaving, his beak snapping. He glared at Danton, fluffed his feathers to twice his size, and let out a guttural hiss. "Enemy!" Rex croaked. "He stays on your side," Danton warned, putting the truck in gear. "If he poops on the upholstery, I'm eating him." "Touch him and you'll lose an eye," I muttered, stroking Rex's head to calm him down. We peeled out of the market, leaving Zola behind in the dust. My heart felt like it was being ripped out of my chest. I watched the side mirror until the market was just a speck on the horizon. "Where did they take her?" I asked, my voice hollow. "South," Danton said, his eyes on the road. "Probably the nitrate mines. Or the Bone Valley." "The Bone Valley is a death sentence," I whispered. "Life is a death sentence, girl. Drink!" He tossed me a plastic water bottle from the center console. Not glacial, just standard filtered. I fumbled with the cap, my hands shaking. I took a sip. The liquid hit my parched tongue and my senses exploded. Hydration is power for a dowser. As soon as the water entered my blood, the scents flared. Salt in the wound. I felt the coolant circulating in the truck's engine. I felt the sweat evaporating on my skin. And I felt Danton. He was a furnace. "You're sick," I said, lowering the bottle. Danton stiffened. "Watch your mouth." "I can feel it," I pressed, looking at the sweat beading on his forehead despite the AC blasting. "Your blood is too thick. You're overheating. You're in heat lock." Danton slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded on the salt flats, slewing sideways. Rex squawked and dug his talons into my thigh for grip. Danton turned on me, his hand dropping to the combat knife on his belt. The air in the cab grew heavy with the scent of ozone, the smell of an angry alpha. "Who are you?" he snarled. "A spy? Did the Baron send you?" "I'm just thirsty," I lied, my heart hammering, "and you look like you're about to have a heart attack." He studied me, his chest heaving. He was fighting his own biology. Alphas needed massive amounts of water to regulate their temperature. He was running on empty. "You see too much," Danton said quietly, releasing the knife handle. "In Sector 4, that gets you killed." He put the truck back in gear. "We're crossing the perimeter. Keep your mouth shut and your bird quiet." Chapter 3. The Fortress of Straw. Sector 4 rose from the desert like a tombstone. It was a massive concrete silo, a remnant of the old world, surrounded by high walls bristling with railguns. It looked impenetrable, powerful. But as we drove through the massive steel gates, I saw the lie. The gardens Danton was famous for were dying. The hydroponic vines climbing the inner walls were brown and brittle, crumbling to dust in the wind. The soldiers patrolling the walls looked thin, their lips chapped. "It's all fake," I whispered, realizing the truth. "You don't have water. You're dry." "Quiet," Danton warned as he parked the truck in the garage. We climbed out. A man was waiting for us. He was shorter than Danton, wiry, with glasses and a datapad. "Torian, the beta." "You're late," Torian snapped, ignoring me completely. "And the pressure in the Trogwell dropped another 2 psi. We have maybe 3 weeks of reserves left before the filtration system fails." "I know, Torian," Danton sighed, rubbing his temples. "Did you get the asset?" Torian finally looked at me. He frowned. "A girl? You bought a girl? Danton, we needed pump parts, not a mouth to feed." Rex hopped onto my shoulder and shrieked at Torian. "Four eyes! 4 eyes!" Torian jumped back. "Is that a crow? You brought a flying rat into a sterile facility?" "He's not a rat," I snapped. "He's security." "She's a hunch," Danton interrupted, unlocking the back of the truck to grab his gear. "Put her in the Alpha Suite." "The Alpha Suite?" Torian choked. "With you? Are you insane? She's a slave." "I need to keep an eye on her," Danton said darkly. "She knew about my condition before the sensors did." Torian went still. He looked at me with renewed interest. "She sensed the heat lock?" "Just put her in the room, Torian, and get me some ice." They escorted me to the elevator. The silo was a vertical city built deep into the earth to escape the sun. We rode up 40 floors to the penthouse. The doors opened into a stark, concrete room. It wasn't luxurious. It was a bunker. Maps covered the walls. Weapons were scattered on the tables. But as soon as I stepped inside, the migraine hit me. It wasn't a headache. It was a pressure, a sharp, singing note behind my left eye. "You have a leak," I blurted out, clutching my head. Danton was unbuckling his tactical vest. He froze. "What?" "The north wall pipe," I said, pointing at the floor where the pressure was coming from. "Sub-level 4. It's cracked. You're losing maybe a liter an hour. It's bleeding into the insulation." Danton walked up to me. He towered over me, smelling of sweat and dangerous heat. "If you're lying," he whispered, "I throw you off the roof." He grabbed his radio. "Engineering, check sub-level 4. North quadrant, tear out the insulation." We waited. 10 agonizing minutes. Rex flew around the room, shredding a tactical map with his beak. Then the radio crackled. "Alpha, the insulation is soaked. The pipe is rusted through. We've been losing water for weeks. How did you know?" Danton slowly lowered the radio. He looked at me. It wasn't the look of a predator anymore. It was the look of a starving man who had just found a feast. "Who are you?" he breathed. Chapter 4. The Salt Flats. The Deal. "Romy," I said. "That's a name. What are you?" He grabbed my wrist. "Come with me." He didn't wait for an answer. He dragged me back to the elevator, back to the truck. Rex refused to be left behind, screeching and flying into the cab before the door closed. Danton drove us out of the silo, miles away, deep into the salt flats. He stopped in the middle of the white wasteland. The ground was cracked and dead. "Get out." We stood in the blinding sun. The heat was oppressive. Danton drew his kinetic pistol. He pointed it at my feet. "Find it," he ordered. "Find what?" "Water," he said. "This used to be an ocean. There are pockets of brine deep down. Find one." "I can't just—" Bang! He fired a shot into the dirt, inches from my toe. I screamed, jumping back. Rex launched from my shoulder, dive-bombing Danton's head, pecking at his hair. "Call off the bird!" Danton roared, swatting at Rex. "And find the water! My people are dying, Romy. I don't care about your secrets. I need water!" His desperation hit me harder than his anger. He wasn't a tyrant. He was a terrified leader trying to keep his pack alive. "Rex, down!" I called. The bird landed on my arm, hissing at Danton. I closed my eyes. I stopped fighting the migraine. I let the barrier in my mind drop. I reached out. Salt in the wound. I felt the dry earth. I felt the silica. And then, deeper. 200 feet down. A vein. Thin, salty, but liquid. I walked. The pull was like a hook in my navel. I stopped about 20 yards away. I fell to my knees. "Here," I gasped, pointing at the cracked earth. "It's deep, but it's here." Danton walked over. He didn't dig, he just looked at me. "A dowser," he whispered, a mix of awe and horror. "The council hunted your kind to extinction 50 years ago." "They missed one," I said, opening my eyes. They were glowing, a faint violet luminescence. Danton holstered his gun. He offered me a hand. "They missed one," he agreed, pulling me up. His grip was strong, warm. "And now you belong to me." I didn't pull away. I looked him in the eye. "I can find you an ocean, Danton," I said, my voice steady. "I can fill your silo, but I have a price." Danton narrowed his eyes. "You're bargaining with a warlord?" "I'm bargaining with a desperate man," I corrected. "I want Zola. You have an army. You have trucks. You help me get her back, and I give you the water." Danton stared at me. "If she's in the Bone Valley, the Baron has her. He's the warlord of Sector 5. Getting her back means war." "Is the water worth it?" I asked. Danton looked at the horizon, calculating. "No," he said softly, "but the water is." He shook my hand. "Deal. We find your sister. You fill my well." Chapter 5. Cold Blood. We drove back to the silo as the sun set. The deal was struck, but the tension in the truck was thick enough to cut. When we reached the penthouse, Danton went straight to the war map. "Torian," he barked into the comms, "bring up the Bone Valley schematics. We're planning an extraction." I collapsed onto a cot in the corner, exhausted. Using the sense drained me. Rex hopped onto my chest, nudging my chin. "Sleep! Sleep!" Suddenly, the bird went rigid. His head snapped toward the ceiling. "Snake! Snake!" Rex whispered. It was a low, guttural croak I hadn't heard before. I sat up. "What is it, Rex?" Rex flew to the air vent in the ceiling. He tapped his beak against the metal grate. Tap, tap, tap. I closed my eyes. I reached out with the sense. Salt in the wound. I felt Danton's heartbeat across the room. I felt the water in the cooler. And then I felt it. A third heartbeat. Fast, erratic, inside the walls. "Danton," I whispered. Danton turned. He saw me pointing at the vent. He saw Rex fluffing his feathers in attack mode. The wolf took over. Danton grabbed a combat knife from the table and moved, silent as a shadow. The vent cover rattled. A small camera probe lowered down. Danton leaped. He grabbed the probe and yanked. Crash! The vent gave way. A man in a black stealth suit tumbled out of the ceiling, landing on the floor. An assassin. The spy scrambled up, pulling a vibroblade. "Sector 5!" Danton roared, lunging. The assassin was fast. He ducked Danton's knife and slashed at the Alpha's chest. Danton roared in pain as the blade cut a shallow line across his pectorals. Blood welled up, bright red. "Danton!" I screamed. Rex didn't hesitate. "Kill! Kill!" The bird dove at the assassin's face, claws raking. "Get off!" the spy yelled, batting the bird away. He hit Rex hard. The bird hit the wall with a sickening thud and fell silent. "Rex!" I shrieked. The assassin kicked Danton back and reached for his belt. He pulled out a grenade, a thermal detonator. "For the Baron!" the spy screamed, his thumb hovering over the trigger. If he pressed it, we were vaporized. "No!" I didn't think. I saw the sweat on the assassin's forehead. I saw the blood pumping in his thumb. "Stop!" I reached out with the sense and squeezed. I froze the fluid in his hand. The assassin screamed. His hand cramped violently, the muscles seizing up as the blood turned to slush. His thumb locked open. He couldn't press the button. Danton didn't hesitate. He crossed the room and drove his knife into the assassin's heart. The spy slumped to the floor. The grenade rolled harmlessly away. Danton stood over the body, chest heaving, blood dripping. He looked at the dead man's hand. It was blue. Frost was forming on the fingertips. He looked at me. His eyes were wide with horror and awe. "You," Danton rasped. "You froze him." I ignored him. I scrambled across the floor to the corner where a pile of black feathers lay. "Rex?" I scooped him up. He was limp. "Is he?" Danton asked, walking over. Rex's eye cracked open. He let out a weak squawk. "Ouch!" I sobbed with relief, clutching him to my chest. Danton knelt beside me. He reached out, not to touch me, but to gently touch Rex's head with one finger. "Tough bird," Danton murmured. Then he looked at me, his gaze intense. "That wasn't dowsing, Romy. That was blood magic. The council kills people for that." "He hurt my bird," I whispered fiercely, "and he was going to kill you." Danton looked at the dead spy's patch, a skull inside a gear. "The Baron knows," Danton said grimly. "We leave at dawn. We get Zola. And then we burn the Baron to the ground." Chapter 6. The Wing and the Weapon. The adrenaline from the assassin's attack faded, leaving a cold, hollow ache in my chest. The dead spy had been dragged away by Torian's guards, but the smell of ozone and frozen blood lingered in the Alpha Suite. I sat on the floor in the corner, my knees pulled to my chest. Rex lay on a towel in my lap. The assassin's blow had done damage. His left wing hung at a wrong angle, dragging on the concrete. "Is it broken?" I whispered, my fingers hovering over the glossy black feathers. Danton knelt beside me. He had cleaned the blood from his own chest, taping a sterile compression pad over the slice the vibroblade had left. He smelled of antiseptic and raw, simmering anger. "Let me see," he rumbled. "Don't hurt him," I warned, shielding the bird. "I'm not going to hurt him, Romy. Move your hand." His voice was surprisingly gentle. I pulled back. Danton's large, calloused fingers that could crush a throat or snap a neck, moved with delicate precision over the crow's hollow bones. Rex let out a low, pained whimper, his beady eye watching the warlord with mistrust. "It's a greenstick fracture," Danton assessed. "Not a clean break. It will heal, but he can't fly for a week." He reached for a roll of medical tape and a wooden tongue depressor from the first aid kit. Efficiently, he splinted the wing, binding it against Rex's body to immobilize it. "There," Danton murmured, stroking the bird's head with his thumb. "You're grounded, little warrior." Rex nipped Danton's finger, but there was no venom in it. "Ouch, ouch." "Yeah, I know," Danton grunted, standing up. He winced as the movement pulled at his own stitches. He walked to the weapons locker on the far wall and punched in a code. The heavy steel door swung open. He pulled out a holster and a heavy, matte black pistol. It wasn't a scavenger scrap gun. This was military grade. A kinetic hand cannon. He turned and tossed it to me. I caught it, the weight of the cold steel surprising me. I checked the chamber instinctively. Loaded. "You're giving me a gun?" I asked, looking up at him. "I'm a slave. I could shoot you and walk out." "You're not a slave," Danton corrected, his silver eyes locking onto mine. "Not anymore. We have a deal." He limped over, towering above me. "We are going into the Bone Valley. It is Trog territory. It is barren territory. If we get separated, I need to know you can protect the asset." "I'm the asset," I reminded him. "Exactly," he smirked, a dark, dangerous expression. "And I hate losing money." He reached down, gripping my chin and tilting my face up. The heat radiating off him was intense, a byproduct of his high metabolism fighting the injury. "If you aim that gun," he whispered, "do not hesitate. Hesitation is dehydration. It kills you slow." I holstered the weapon, feeling the heavy reassure against my hip. I picked up Rex, cradling him like a baby. "I won't hesitate," I promised. "Not if it stands between me and Zola." "Good." Danton turned to the door. "Get some sleep, Romy. We leave at 0400, and pray your sister is still alive when we get there." Chapter 7. The Leviathan. The garage of Sector 4 was a cathedral of grease and echoes. At 0400, the lights were dim, casting long shadows over the rows of transport trucks. But Danton didn't walk toward the trucks. He walked toward the back, to a restricted bay sealed by a blast door. "Torian," Danton spoke into his comms. "Open Bay 1. The gears groaned, centuries of dust falling from the ceiling as the massive door rolled up. My jaw dropped. Sitting in the bay wasn't a truck. It was a monster. A main battle tank from the old world, retrofitted with massive off-road treads and plated in black composite armor. A heavy cannon sat in the turret, and a plow shaped like a V was welded to the front, designed to ram through bedrock. Painted on the barrel of the cannon in white letters was the name, Leviathan. "We're taking a tank?" I asked, clutching Rex's travel box against my chest. "We're invading a hostile sector," Danton said, throwing his gear bag onto the hull. "I don't knock, I breach." He climbed up the side ladder, wincing as his chest wound stretched. I followed, swinging into the passenger hatch. The interior smelled of recycled air, leather, and high-octane fuel. It was cramped but high-tech. Screens glowed with green topographic maps. "Strap in," Danton ordered, sliding into the driver's seat. "And secure the bird." I buckled Rex's box into the jump seat behind me. "Dark! Box bad!" Rex complained from inside. "It's for your own good, buddy," I whispered. Danton punched the ignition sequence. The engine didn't roar, it thrummed. A deep, seismic vibration that I felt in my teeth. The Leviathan woke up. "Torian, drop the main gate," Danton commanded. "Alpha," Torian's voice crackled over the radio, sounding anxious. "Sensors show a sandstorm brewing in the western expanse. Visibility will be 0. "We don't need eyes," Danton growled, shifting the massive machine into gear. "We have a dowser." The garage gate opened, revealing the purple bruise of the pre-dawn sky. Danton slammed the throttle. The tank lurched forward, crushing a loose crate under its treads as we rolled out into the scorch. The journey was brutal. The suspension of the Leviathan was designed for war, not comfort. We bounced over dunes and smashed through petrified forests. Inside the cab, the temperature began to rise. Even with the AC, Danton was sweating. His skin was flushed. He was drinking water constantly, crushing empty plastic bottles and tossing them into the footwell. "You're burning up," I said, watching him. "The wound is accelerating the heat lock." "I'm fine," he snapped, his knuckles white on the yoke. "Let me drive," I offered. "I can drive a scrap hauler. I can drive this." "This isn't a scooter, Romy. It's 60 tons of death. You touch the controls, we flip." He took another swig of water, his hand shaking slightly. "Just do your job," he rasped. "Scan the horizon. The Bone Valley is 10 miles out. If there's water, I want to know. If there's an ambush, I want to know first." I closed my eyes, letting the vibration of the tank settle into my bones. I reached out with the sense. Salt in the wound. I felt the coolant in the tank. I felt Danton's boiling blood. And ahead, I felt the dry, hollow silence of death. "I feel it," I whispered. "It feels empty." "That's the valley," Danton said grimly. "Welcome to the graveyard." Chapter 8. The Valley of Giants. The sun rose, revealing the horror of the geography. The Bone Valley wasn't a metaphor, it was a literal graveyard of giants. Massive, bleached white ribs curved out of the sand, arching hundreds of feet into the air. They were the bones of leviathans, ancient biological sea creatures from the time before the brine. They formed a tunnel of skeletal arches that stretched for miles. "Whales," Danton said softly, slowing the tank. "My grandfather told me about them. They used to swim in the water that covered all of this." "It's haunting," I whispered, pressing my hand against the thick glass of the viewport. "It's treacherous," Danton corrected, his tone shifting back to business. "The sand here is soft, silt. If we drive too slow, we sink. If we drive too fast, we flip." He pointed to the ground. "Look." There, etched into the silt between the massive ribs, were tracks. Deep, wide tread marks of a heavy transport convoy. "The slaver trucks," I said, my heart leaping into my throat. "Zola!" "Fresh tracks," Danton nodded, analyzing the depth. "Maybe 2 hours ahead. They must have slowed down for the sandstorm." He pushed the throttle forward, but gently this time. The Leviathan wove through the ribs of the dead giants. It was like driving through the belly of a skeletal beast. The shadows of the bones cast long, dark bars across the sand, playing tricks on the eyes. Rex had gone quiet in his box. Even the birds sensed the wrongness of this place. "Why is nobody here?" I asked. "If this is Baron territory, where are the patrols?" "The Baron doesn't patrol the valley," Danton said, his eyes scanning the ridgelines. "He lets the Trogs do it." "Trogs?" "Subterrestrials," Danton explained. "Mutated scavengers, blind. They hunt by vibration. They live in the caves under the ribs." He glanced at me. "That's why we're in a tank. If we were on foot, they would have swarmed us by now." My blood ran cold. Zola was on a transport truck. If that truck broke down, if they stopped... "Faster!" I pleaded. "Danton, go faster!" "We're catching them," he assured me. "Look!" He pointed to a plume of dust rising about 3 miles ahead. "There," he said. I grabbed the digital binoculars from the dash. Through the magnification, I saw them. 3 large armored trucks and a cage trailer. In the trailer, huddled together like cattle, were dozens of figures. I zoomed in. I saw a flash of yellow fabric. "I see her!" I choked out. "The yellow scarf! It's Zola!" "They're stopping," Danton frowned. "Why are they stopping?" I looked again. The convoy wasn't just stopping. They were circling the wagons. Guards were jumping out, taking positions behind the wheels. "They see us?" I asked. "No." Danton's face hardened. "They aren't looking at us. They're looking at the ridges." Suddenly, the sand around the convoy exploded. Chapter 9. The Ambush. "It's a trap!" Danton shouted. It wasn't the Baron. It wasn't us. From the caves in the cliffside, figures poured out. They were pale, hairless, and ran on all fours like spiders. Trogs. Hundreds of them. They swarmed down the bone ribs, screeching a sound that vibrated even through the tank's hull. "They're attacking the convoy!" I yelled. The slaver guards opened fire. Blue plasma bolts lit up the dim valley, cutting down the first wave of Trogs, but there were too many. The creatures leaped onto the trucks, tearing at the metal with claws that could shred steel. "They're going to slaughter the prisoners," Danton realized. "The Trogs want the meat." "Zola!" I screamed, grabbing the door handle. "Don't open that door!" Danton roared, grabbing my collar and yanked me back. "You step out there, you're dinner!" "We have to help them!" "We are!" Danton slammed the tank into gear. "Gunner station, now!" He pointed to the seat behind me that controlled the turret. I scrambled into the seat, putting on the headset. The monitor flared to life, showing a 360-degree view of the massacre. "We're going in hot," Danton yelled. "Target the trogs! Watch your fire around the cage!" The Leviathan roared, closing the distance in seconds. We crashed through a dune, launching into the air and slamming down right in the middle of the chaos. Danton spun the tank, using the massive rear tracks to crush a trog that was trying to pry open the cage door. "Fire, Romy!" I squeezed the triggers. The turret-mounted machine gun roared. Thud, thud, thud. I sprayed the ridge, cutting a line of dust and death between the trogs and the prisoners. The heavy rounds tore the pale monsters apart. "They're climbing the tank!" Danton shouted. I heard the clang of bodies hitting our hull. "Hatch!" Danton unbuckled. He grabbed his kinetic pistol and his combat knife. "Danton, no!" "Cover me!" He popped the top hatch. The sound of screeching and gunfire flooded the cabin. Danton surged up, halfway out of the tank. A trog lunged at him from the roof. Danton didn't even flinch. He caught the creature by the throat midair, his alpha strength surging despite his exhaustion. He fired 3 rounds into its chest. Bang, bang, bang! And threw the carcass off the side. He was a blur of violence. He shot another trog, stabbed a third that tried to enter the hatch, and roared, a sound so primal it made the trogs hesitate. "Clear the cage!" Danton ordered me over the headset. "I'll hold the roof." I spun the turret, aiming at the swarm attacking Zola's trailer. I walked the gunfire carefully, picking off the monsters inching toward the terrified prisoners. Finally, the trogs broke. The noise, the tank, and the alpha were too much. With high-pitched shrieks, they retreated back into the shadows of the caves. Silence fell over the valley, broken only by the sobbing of the prisoners and the idling of our engine. Danton dropped back into the cabin, slamming the hatch. He was covered in black trog blood. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving, sweat soaking his clothes. "Status?" he wheezed. "Clear," I breathed, my hands shaking on the controls. "They're gone." "Good." Danton slumped into a seat. "Let's go get your sister." Chapter 10. The Yellow Scarf. We exited the Leviathan. The air smelled of sulfur, copper blood, and fear. The slaver guards were all dead. The trogs had taken them first. The only survivors were the prisoners in the cage trailer. I ran toward the cage. "Zola!" A small figure in the corner uncurled. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, her yellow scarf torn. She looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Romy?" she croaked. "I'm here!" I grabbed the padlock on the cage door. It was heavy iron. "Danton, the key!" Danton limped up behind me. He didn't have a key. He raised his heavy kinetic pistol and fired a single shot into the lock. Clang! The lock shattered. I ripped the door open. Zola scrambled out, falling into my arms. We collided, hugging so tight it hurt. She felt thin, brittle, but alive. "You came!" she sobbed into my shoulder. "You actually came!" "Salt in the wound," I whispered our oath, tears streaming down my face. "I told you I wouldn't let you dry out." "Okay, reunion over," Danton's gruff voice cut in. He was standing guard, scanning the ridges. He looked pale. The fight had drained his hydration levels critically. "We need to load them up," Danton said, gesturing to the 20 survivors huddled in the cage. "The Leviathan can fit them if we stack tight. We leave in 5. "Thank you," Zola whispered, looking at Danton with terror and awe. "Warlord, thank you." Danton didn't look at her. He was staring at the lead slaver truck. The driver was dead, slumped over the wheel. "Something's wrong," Danton muttered. He walked over to the dead driver. He pulled the body out and searched the cab. "What is it?" I asked, keeping one arm around Zola. Danton pulled a datapad from the dashboard. He tapped the screen. His face went dark. "This wasn't a transport," Danton said softly. "It was a lure." "What?" "Look at the manifest." Danton turned the screen to me. "Mission, Operation Honeypot. Cargo, Bait, Unit 734 Associate. Objective, draw out Sector 4 assets. Confirm location of Water Witch." My blood turned to ice. They knew, I whispered. The Baron knew I would come for her. He didn't just want Zola, Danton said, looking at the cliffs above us. He wanted you, and he wanted me out of the silo. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. Not the screech of trogs, the hum of engines. From the ridgeline above us, floodlights snapped on. Blinding white beams cut through the gloom, pinning us against the whalebones. "Warlord Danton!" a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "You are trespassing in Sector 5. Danton looked up, shielding his eyes. Standing on the ridge, surrounded by a dozen heavy cannons pointed directly at us, was a massive figure in gold-plated power armor. The Baron. "And," the Baron chuckled, his voice oily and cruel, "I believe you have something of mine." We were trapped. Chapter 11. The Golden Cage. The floodlights were blinding. They cut through the gloom of the Bone Valley, turning the white whale ribs into stark, jagged shadows. I shielded my eyes, squinting up at the ridge. The Baron stood like a golden idol, his power armor humming with a low-frequency vibration that rattled my teeth. Behind him, the barrels of a dozen rail cannons glowed with charging energy. "Danton," I whispered, gripping Zola's trembling arm. "He has the high ground." Danton didn't look at the guns. He looked at the Baron. The warlord's face was pale, sweat streaming down his neck, but he stood with his feet planted wide, refusing to show weakness. "You're a long way from home, Baron," Danton shouted, his voice rough but carrying over the wind. "Sector 5 jurisdiction ends at the salt line." "Jurisdiction is for people who run out of ammo," the Baron laughed. The sound was amplified by his helmet speakers, a wet, metallic wheeze. "And you, Wolf, look like you're running on empty." The Baron raised a massive, gauntleted hand. He pointed a finger directly at me. "I will make this simple," the Baron boomed. "Give me the girl, the witch, and I will let you and your mechanic crawl back to your dry little silo." Zola gasped, clutching my sleeve. "Romy?" "He knows," I breathed, my blood running cold. "The driver, the one who escaped the ambush in the scorch, he told him." Danton stepped in front of me. He blocked the Baron's view, his broad shoulders creating a wall of black tactical gear between me and the gold armor. "She's not a witch," Danton growled. "She's a pain in my ass, and she's not for sale." "Everything is for sale, Danton," the Baron sneered. "I bought the convoy. I bought the intel on your location. I can buy her life, or I can take it from your corpse." The cannons on the ridge whirred, locking onto the Leviathan. "Get in the tank," Danton whispered to me, not moving his lips. "What?" "Get Zola in the tank, now!" "Danton, if you stay out here, they'll vaporize you." "I'm the distraction," he hissed. He reached behind his back, his hand hovering over a smoke grenade on his belt. "When I blow the smoke, you drive. Don't look back." "I'm not leaving you." "That's an order, asset," Danton roared, shoving me backward. He pulled the pin. Foom! A wall of thick, white phosphorus smoke exploded outward, blinding the sensors on the ridge. "Fire!" the Baron screamed from the cliffs. The rail cannons erupted. Blue streaks of energy tore through the smoke, scorching the sand where we had just been standing. "Move!" I grabbed Zola and shoved her toward the Leviathan's open hatch. "Get inside!" We scrambled up the ladder. Bullets pinged off the hull like angry hornets. Zola dove into the hatch, and I followed, tumbling into the cabin. "Danton!" I screamed, reaching back out. A dark shape lunged through the smoke. Danton grabbed the ladder rail, swinging himself up. A laser blast clipped his boot, sending sparks flying, but he hauled himself into the hatch. He slammed the seal shut just as a heavy shell exploded against the side of the tank. Boom! The Leviathan rocked violently, throwing us all to the floor. "Go!" Danton gasped, clutching his chest. "Zola! Driver's seat! Get us out of the kill box!" Chapter 12. The Iron Silt. Zola didn't ask questions. She scrambled into the driver's seat, her mechanic instincts taking over. She punched the ignition. The Leviathan roared. "Where do I go?" Zola yelled over the sound of explosions hammering the hull. "They have the ridge blocked." "Go deeper!" Danton wheezed from the floor. He was struggling to stand, his face gray. The heat lock was setting in fast. His body was shutting down. Into the ribs! The silt is too deep for their heavy cannons. They'll sink. What about us? I asked, crawling to the gunner's station. We have treads, Danton gritted out. We float. Drive! Zola slammed the throttle. The tank surged forward, smashing through a pile of trog bones. We dove into the skeletal tunnel of the whale ribs. Outside, the world was chaos. I watched the rear monitor. The Baron's heavy cannons couldn't follow us into the narrow, soft terrain. They were too heavy, but smaller vehicles were pursuing. Skiffs! I shouted. 3 of them! Hoverbikes! Fast, light attack vehicles were zipping over the dunes, closing the distance. They were armed with plasma lances. "Row me the turret," Danton ordered. He had dragged himself into the commander's chair, strapping in with shaking hands. "Keep them off our tail." I grabbed the controls. My hands were sweating. I wasn't a soldier. I was a scavenger. I don't know how to lead a target. I panicked as the crosshairs bounced wildly. "Don't aim for the riders," Danton said, his voice straining. "Aim for the intake fans. They're fragile." I took a deep breath. Salt in the wound. I swung the turret. The lead skiff was gaining on us, its lance charging up. I saw the intake fan glowing blue on its underbelly. I squeezed the trigger. Thud, thud, thud. The heavy machine gun kicked. Tracers flew through the dark. The first burst went wide, kicking up sand. "Adjust left!" Danton barked. I pulled left. The second burst connected. The skiff's engine exploded. The vehicle nosedived into the silt, cartwheeling in a ball of fire. "Got him!" I yelled. "2 more!" Zola screamed from the front. "They're flanking!" The remaining skiffs split up, coming at us from both sides of the whale ribs. They fired. Plasma bolts scorched the black armor of the Leviathan. The cabin temperature spiked. "Warning," the computer droned. "Hull integrity at 80%. "Rex is freaking out!" Zola shouted. I looked back. The travel box was rattling violently. "Box bad! Fire! Fire!" "Hold on, Rex," I promised. "Zola, brake right!" Danton commanded. "Ram the rib!" "What?" "Do it!" Zola yanked the yoke. The 60-ton tank swerved, slamming into one of the massive fossilized whale ribs. Crash! The bone shattered. A shower of heavy, calcified debris rained down, directly onto the skiff flanking our right side. The hoverbike was crushed instantly under a ton of ancient bone. "One left," Danton panted. He slumped back in his chair, his eyes rolling back. "Row me. Finish it." Chapter 13. The Heat Lock. The last skiff was smart. It fell back, staying out of range of my turret, but keeping a laser lock on us. "He's painting us," I realized. "He's guiding the artillery from the ridge." A massive shell whistled overhead, exploding 50 yards in front of us. Sand geysered into the air. "They're bracketing us," Zola cried, wrestling the tank through the soft silt. "We're losing speed! The engine is overheating!" I looked at Danton. He was unconscious, his head lolled to the side. His skin was bright red, radiating heat like a furnace. The bandage on his chest was soaked through with fresh blood. The exertion of the fight, combined with the lack of water, had finally broken him. "Danton!" I unbuckled and scrambled to him. I touched his face. It burned my hand. "Zola, he's cooking! He's in full heat lock!" "We need to stop!" Zola yelled. "We need to cool the engine and him!" "If we stop, the artillery kills us." I looked at the monitor. The last skiff was still there, the laser dot steady on our hull. I couldn't shoot it. It was too far, and I couldn't save Danton while we were being hunted. I needed to blind them. I climbed back into the gunner's seat. I didn't reach for the trigger. I reached for the sense. I closed my eyes. The tank rumbled around me. I pushed my mind out, past the armor, past the dust. I felt the skiff pilot. I felt his sweat. I felt the coolant in his engine. It was too far to freeze him, too far to stop his heart. But I felt something else. Deep beneath the sand, a pocket. Not water, methane. The Bone Valley was a graveyard. Rotting marrow created gas pockets trapped under the silt. The skiff was hovering right over one. "Burn," I whispered. I didn't have fire, but I had pressure. I located the liquid condensation inside the skiff's fuel line. I squeezed it. I spiked the pressure until the line ruptured. Fuel sprayed onto the skiff's hot exhaust. Flash! The skiff ignited. The pilot screamed, losing control. The burning vehicle crashed downward, straight into the sand. The impact cracked the crust of the methane pocket. Kaboom! A pillar of blue fire erupted from the ground, consuming the skiff and the pilot in a geyser of flame. "Holy!" Zola gasped. "Did you do that?" "Drive!" I yelled, scrambling back to Danton. "Find a cave! We need to hide!" Zola spotted a cavern opening at the base of a massive spinal column. She drove the Leviathan inside, killing the engine instantly to hide our heat signature. Darkness swallowed us. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. "Is he alive?" Zola whispered, turning in her seat. I checked Danton's pulse. It was erratic, fast, thready, and skipping beats. "Barely," I said, tearing open his shirt. "We have to cool him down. Now!" Chapter 14. The Blood Cooler. The interior of the tank was stifling. With the engine off, the air recycling stopped. The lingering heat from the desert and the machinery turned the cabin into an oven. Danton was dying. His body convulsed, a seizure racking his massive frame. Foam gathered at the corners of his mouth. "Water!" I demanded. "Zola, give me the reserves!" Zola scrambled to the back. "We're out, Romy. He drank the last bottles on the drive over. The auxiliary tank was punctured by the trogs." "There has to be something." "There's coolant fluid," Zola offered a canister. "But it's toxic. If he drinks it, it kills him." I looked at the toxic blue sludge. I looked at Danton. "Open the hatch," I said. "It's cooler outside in the cave." Zola popped the hatch. Cool, stale air rushed in. It wasn't enough. I straddled Danton's waist, pinning him down as he thrashed. He was hallucinating. "No, the gate," he mumbled, his eyes unseeing. "Hold the gate." "Danton, look at me!" I slapped his cheek lightly. "Stay with me." He didn't see me. He was burning from the inside out. His wolf blood was boiling him. I placed my hands on his bare chest, right over his heart. "What are you doing?" Zola asked, her voice trembling. "I'm going to cool him," I said, manually. "You can't create ice," Zola whispered. "You're a dowser, not a freezer." "Watch me." I closed my eyes. I sank into the sense. It was chaotic inside him. His blood was rushing like a river in a flood, hot and turbulent. The trog poison was still there, lurking in the tissues, aggravated by the heat. I focused on the blood vessels in his chest. I couldn't make them cold. Magic required energy exchange, but I could slow them. "Slow down," I commanded the fluid. "Calm." I visualized the heat leaving his body, dissipating into the air. I pulled the heat out of his blood and pushed it into my own hands, then out into the air. My hands burned. It felt like I was holding a hot coal. "Romy, your hands are smoking," Zola gasped. "Don't stop me," I gritted out, sweat dripping down my nose. I moved the heat, cycle by cycle. I pulled the fever from his core and vented it. It was exhausting. My vision blurred. My nose started to bleed, dripping red onto his chest. Danton gasped. His back arched. Then he slumped. His breathing deepened. The frantic, rabbit kick of his heart slowed to a powerful, steady rhythm. His skin cooled from burning to just feverish. I collapsed on top of him, my head resting on his shoulder. "You did it," Zola breathed. Rex chirped from his box. "Alpha cool, Alpha sleep." I couldn't answer. I was drained. I lay there, listening to the steady beat of the heart I had just saved for the second time. "He owes me," I mumbled into his shirt. "So much." Chapter 15. The Ultimatum. I woke up to the sound of static. My head was pounding. I was still curled up on Danton's chest, but he hadn't moved. He was sleeping deeply, a restorative coma. Zola was at the dashboard, fiddling with the comms radio. What is it? I croaked, sitting up. My hands were blistered, heat burns from the magic. It's the Baron, Zola whispered, her face pale in the green light of the console. He's broadcasting on all frequencies. Open channel. She turned the volume up. No, you are in the valley, Danton. The Baron's oily voice filled the cabin. My scanners show your tank is disabled. You have no water. You have no support. I looked at the dashboard clock. We had been out for 4 hours. It was full night outside. I am a generous man, the Baron continued. I will give you until sunrise. Walk out of the cave. Leave the girl. Leave the tank. And you may walk back to Sector 4 alive. A pause. But if you are not out by dawn, I will unleash the juggernaut, and I will bury you under this mountain. The transmission clicked off. Juggernaut? Zola asked. What's a juggernaut? Big. A rough voice rasped from below me. Danton's eyes were open. They were clear. The molten silver was back. Danton! I helped him sit up. He winced, clutching his side, but he was lucid. You saved me again, he said, looking at my blistered hands. He took one gently in his own. You burned yourself. I pulled the heat out, I shrugged, wincing. It had to go somewhere. He kissed my palm. It was a quick, rough gesture, but it sent a shock through me. The Baron is lying, Danton said, shifting into command mode. He won't let us walk. He wants to make an example of us. So what do we do? Zola asked. We can't fight a juggernaut. We're one tank against an army. Danton looked at the radio. Then he looked at the map on the screen. The juggernaut is a siege engine, Danton said. It's slow, it's heavy, and it uses massive amounts of hydraulic fluid to move its treads. He looked at me. A wicked, wolfish grin spread across his face. Romy, he said, how much fluid can you control? I burst a fuel line on a skiff, I said, and I froze a hand. Can you burst a high-pressure line the size of a tree trunk? Danton asked. I thought about the power I had felt earlier, the anger. If I'm close enough, I said, yes. Good. Danton unbuckled his harness. We aren't surrendering. We're going to break his toy. But we're trapped, Zola pointed out. If we drive out, they shoot us. We don't drive out, Danton said, pointing to the rear of the cave on the map. We dig deeper. The Trog tunnels connect to the main fault line. We flank them from underground. He looked at us. We go into the dark. We hit them from beneath, and we steal their water. Chapter 16. The Vein of Darkness. The Leviathan didn't have headlights. It had flood lamps designed to blind enemies, but down here, Danton ordered them off. If we light up the tunnel, Danton whispered, his voice barely audible over the low rumble of the engine, we announced dinner. We were descending into the earth. The cave mouth had narrowed into a natural basalt tube, slick with condensation and smelling of sulfur and wet fur. Zola was driving using only the thermal imaging on the dashboard, her knuckles white on the yoke. I hate this, Zola muttered, guiding the 60-ton tank over a ridge of calcified bone. I hate caves. I hate the dark. I hate that I can hear them scuttling. She was right. Even through the armored hull, we could hear it. Scritch, scritch, tap. The sound of claws on stone. The trogs were all around us, nesting in the fissures of the walls. Keep the RPMs under 2,000, Danton commanded from the passenger seat. He looked better. The cooling treatment had pulled him back from the edge of heat lock, but he was still pale, clutching his bandaged side. If the engine revs, the vibration will trigger a swarm. I sat in the gunner's chair, my eyes closed, my blistered hands resting on my knees. I wasn't looking at the monitors. I was looking with the sense. The tunnel was alive. To my mind, the darkness wasn't empty. It was filled with pulses of fluid. I felt the stagnant water dripping from stalactites. I felt the frantic, rapid heartbeats of the trogs sleeping in the ceiling. They were wet, slimy things, their blood cold and sluggish. Left, I whispered into the headset. Sharp left, Zola. There's a nest on the right. Zola obeyed instantly, swerving the tank around a massive pillar of rock. How close are we? Danton asked me. Deep, I said, suppressing a shiver. We're under the valley floor. But I can feel... something else. Above us. The juggernaut? Yes, I nodded, the pressure behind my eyes spiking. It feels like a lake. A massive, contained lake of oil and hydraulic fluid. It's heavy. It's pressing down on the earth. That's our target, Danton said. He checked his kinetic pistol, sliding the magazine home with a quiet click. We get underneath it. We blow the ceiling. We drop the tank into the pit. Rex is vibrating, Zola warned. I looked back. The travel box was shaking violently. Rex wasn't screeching. He knew better than to make noise in the dark, but he was thrashing. He smells them, I said, unbuckling and moving to the box. I put my hand on the plastic grate. Shh, Rex. Salt in the wound. Stay quiet. Bad, wet, Rex croaked, his voice a tiny rasp. I know, I whispered. We're walking through the belly of the beast. Suddenly, the tank lurched. The tread slipped on something slick. The engine revved, just for a second, as Zola fought for traction. Vroom! The sound echoed down the tunnel like a gunshot. Silence followed. Then, from the darkness above us, a single, piercing shriek answered. Run! Danton roared. Zola, floor it! Chapter 17. The Sealing of Bone. Zola slammed the throttle forward. The need for stealth was gone. The Leviathan roared, its tracks chewing into the wet stone floor. We surged forward, accelerating into the blackness. Contact! I yelled, scrambling back to the gunner's seat. Rear monitor! The thermal screen lit up with hundreds of heat signatures. They were pouring out of the walls, dropping from the ceiling, a tidal wave of pale limbs and gnashing teeth. They're faster than the tank! Zola screamed, swerving to avoid a boulder. Don't stop, Danton barked. Romy, turret! If I fire, I might bring the roof down, I argued, looking at the unstable rock formation on the screens. If you don't fire, they'll strip the armor and eat us alive. Clear the rear! I grabbed the controls. My hands hurt, the blisters from the heat transfer throbbing against the leather grips. I swung the turret backward. Thud, 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 thud. The heavy machine gun opened up. The muzzle flashes lit up the tunnel like a strobe light, revealing a nightmare. The trogs were everywhere. I saw their eyeless faces, their rows of needle teeth. I sprayed the tunnel floor, turning the pursuing wave into a mist of black blood and limbs. Climbing! Zola yelled. They're on the hull! I heard the thump, thump, thump of bodies landing on the roof. They were scratching at the hatches, testing the seals. Hold the line! Danton unbuckled. He grabbed a flare gun from the emergency kit. What are you doing? I shouted. I'm giving them a new sun, Danton growled. He cracked the passenger side viewport, just an inch. He shoved the flare gun barrel through the gap and pulled the trigger. Fzzzt! The magnesium flare shot out, embedding itself in the ceiling of the tunnel behind us. It burned with a blinding, white-hot intensity. The trogs shrieked. They were creatures of the dark. The light burned their sensitive skin like acid. The swarm recoiled, scattering away from the burning star Danton had created. Clear! Danton slammed the port shut. Zola, how far to the fault line? 200 meters, Zola yelled. But the ceiling is getting lower. That's because we're under the weight, I said, the pressure in my head becoming a physical agony. The juggernaut is right on top of us. I can feel the fluid. It's massive, Danton. Thousands of gallons. Perfect. Danton smiled, a wolf baring its teeth. Zola, aim for the fissure in the roof. We're going to breach. We're going to ram the ceiling, Zola choked. We're going to rise from the grave, Danton corrected. Hit it with everything she's got. Zola gritted her teeth. She lined the tank up with a jagged crack in the rock ceiling above us. Hold on to your butts! The Leviathan hit the incline. We shot upward. The plow struck the rock. Crash! Chapter 18. The Underbelly. The world exploded in dust and noise. The Leviathan smashed through the thin crust of the cavern ceiling. We burst out of the ground in a shower of rock and debris, launching into the open air of the Bone Valley. The tank slammed down on the sand, rocking violently on its suspension. Status, Danton shouted. We're upright, Zola yelled, checking the dashboard. Tracks are holding! I looked at the main monitor. We weren't just in the valley. We were inside the enemy formation. The breach had put us directly behind the Baron's siege line. The juggernaut loomed above us, a towering skyscraper of rust and iron, its massive treads churning the sand just 50 yards away. It was facing the cave entrance we had been hiding in. We were in its blind spot. They don't know we're here, I breathed. They will in a second, Danton said. Target the rear drive wheel. Romy, hit it! I spun the turret. The juggernaut's rear axle was a massive cog the size of a house. I squeezed the trigger. The machine gun hammered the metal. Sparks flew, but the rounds ricocheted off the heavy plating. It's too thick, I yelled. I can't penetrate the armor. The juggernaut began to turn. The massive turret on top of the siege engine rotated slowly, searching for the source of the attack. A spotlight swept over us. We're spotted, Zola cried. Move, Danton ordered. Get under the guns. Zola gunned the engine. The Leviathan shot forward, weaving between the massive support struts of the juggernaut. We were fighting in the shadow of a giant. A heavy shell from the juggernaut's secondary cannons exploded behind us, flipping a slaver truck that had been parked nearby. We can't shoot it down, Danton, I shouted, watching our rounds bounce off the iron hide. It's a fortress! Every fortress has veins, Danton said, looking at me. His silver eyes were intense. You said you felt the fluid. Where is it? I closed my eyes, tuning out the roar of battle. I reached out with the sense. I felt it. A massive, high-pressure artery running up the back of the juggernaut's leg. It was pumping hydraulic fluid to the main cannon. The left strut, I said, pointing. The main line. It's exposed near the joint. Zola, get us close to the left strut, Danton commanded. I'm trying, Zola yelled, dodging a falling piece of debris. It's moving too fast. Romy, Danton grabbed my shoulder. You have to burst it. Use the magic. It's too much pressure, I whispered, looking at the size of the line. It was thick as a barrel. I need to be closer. Danton unbuckled his harness. He looked at the roof hatch. Then we get closer, he said. Cover me. Chapter 19. The Hydraulic Heart. What are you doing? I screamed as Danton kicked the hatch open. I'm buying you a shot, he roared. He climbed out of the tank. The wind whipped his black coat. He stood on the roof of the moving Leviathan, balancing on his good leg, the metal brace locking him in place. He raised his heavy kinetic pistol. He wasn't aiming at the juggernaut. He was aiming at a fuel drum strapped to the side of the enemy machine. Bang! Bang! The drum ruptured. Fuel sprayed out, coating the juggernaut's left leg. Now! Danton looked down at me through the open hatch. Romy, climb up. You need line of sight. I hesitated. Outside was death. Outside was the Baron. Go! Zola yelled from the driver's seat. I can't hold this turn forever. I unbuckled. I grabbed the ladder and hauled myself up. The noise was deafening. The smell of burning oil was choking. I stood beside Danton on the roof of the tank. He wrapped one massive arm around my waist, anchoring me against his body so I wouldn't fall. There. He pointed to the fuel-soaked strut. The hose! It's right there! I saw it. A thick, black rubber line, pulsing with the force of the fluid inside. I raised my hands. My blisters screamed in protest. Salt in the wound. I reached out with my mind. I grabbed the fluid inside that hose. It was heavy, viscous. It fought me. The pressure was immense, thousands of pounds per square inch. Break, I whispered, gritting my teeth. I squeezed. Nothing happened. The hose held. Romy! Danton warned. The juggernaut's secondary turret was swinging toward us. The barrel looked like a black eye staring into my soul. I can't! I cried, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. It's too strong! It's just water, Danton shouted in my ear, his voice fierce. It's just liquid, Romy. You control the tap. Break it. I felt his heart beating against my back. Strong. Alive. I pulled on that strength. I channeled my fear, my anger, my thirst. Burst! I threw my hands apart. Boom! The hydraulic line didn't just leak, it exploded. A geyser of high-pressure fluid shot out, cutting through the fuel-soaked air. The sudden loss of pressure was catastrophic. The juggernaut's left leg buckled. The massive machine groaned, a sound like a dying whale. It tilted. Then, the fuel ignited. Whoosh! Fire raced up the leg of the juggernaut, fed by the spraying hydraulic fluid. The machine listed heavily to the left, its treads grinding to a halt as the drive gear seized. "It's falling!" Danton pulled me down, shielding me with his body as the giant tipped. The juggernaut crashed into the sand with an earth-shattering impact. Chapter 20. The Gold and the Dust. The silence that followed was heavy. The juggernaut lay on its side, a burning mountain of scrap. The slaver army had stopped firing. They were staring at their fallen idol. "We killed it," I whispered, my voice shaking. I was pressed against the metal of the tank roof, Danton's weight protective over me. "Not yet," Danton murmured. He stood up, pulling me with him. He looked toward the ridge. The Baron's command skiff descended. It landed 50 yards away. The hatch opened. The Baron stepped out. He was a grotesque monument to excess. His gold-plated power armor gleamed in the firelight. He held a massive warhammer in one hand, the head glowing with energy. He didn't look afraid. He looked furious. "You broke my toy," the Baron boomed, his voice amplified by his helmet. "That platform cost 10,000 liters. "I'll send you a bill for the ammo," Danton called back, limping to the edge of the tank roof. He leaned on the turret, looking down at the golden warlord. "You think you've won?" The Baron laughed, a wet, wheezing sound. "I have 500 men on that ridge. I have you surrounded." "Your men are thirsty, Baron," I said, stepping up beside Danton. My voice was amplified by the tank's external speakers. "And they just watched a girl in a cripple take down your god." The Baron's helmet turned toward me. The faceplate was opaque, but I could feel his hate. "The witch," he sneered. "Come down here, girl. Let me squeeze the magic out of you." "I'm done running," I said. I looked at Danton. "Cover me." "Romy, no," Danton grabbed my wrist. "He's in power armor. He'll crush you." "He's a man in a can," I said, pulling away. "And cans are full of liquid." I jumped down from the tank. I landed in the soft sand. The Baron roared and charged. He moved surprisingly fast for his size, the servos in his suit whining. He raised the hammer. I didn't draw my gun. I stood my ground. I waited until he was 10 feet away. I could hear the pumps in his suit. I could hear the sweat rolling down his fat neck. Water in the blood. I reached out. I didn't go for the suit's hydraulics. I went deeper. I grabbed his heart. "Stop!" I clenched my fist. The Baron froze mid-stride. The hammer dropped from his hand, thudding into the sand. He made a choking, gurgling sound. I walked toward him. My head was splitting, my nose bleeding freely now, but I held the grip. I squeezed his heart like a sponge. "You wanted my water?" I whispered, looking into his gold faceplate. The Baron fell to his knees. He clawed at his chest plate, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "I'm not thirsty," I said coldly. I twisted my hand. Inside the suit, something burst. The Baron collapsed face first into the sand. He twitched once, then lay still. The gold armor was now just a coffin. I stood over him, swaying. The silence in the valley was absolute. Then, from the top of the Leviathan, Danton raised his fist. "The Baron is dead!" he roared. The slaver army hesitated. Then, one by one, they dropped their weapons. They fell to their knees, not in prayer, but in surrender. I looked back at Danton. He was looking at me with a mixture of pride and terrified awe. I tried to smile, but the world spun. The ground rushed up to meet me. The last thing I felt was the cool sand against my cheek. Chapter 21. The Weight of Gold. The silence in the Bone Valley was heavier than the Juggernaut's wreckage. I drifted in and out of consciousness. I felt sand against my cheek, then the rough texture of tactical fabric. I felt strong arms lifting me. "I've got her," a deep voice rumbled against my ear. Danton. I tried to open my eyes, but the world swam in a nauseating blur of gray and black. My head felt like it had been split open with an axe, the cost of squeezing a man's heart from 10 feet away. Is she breathing? Zola's voice, sharp with panic. Barely, Danton grunted. Open the hatch, now. I forced one eye open. We were moving. Danton was carrying me toward the Leviathan. He was limping heavily, his left leg dragging in the sand, favoring the side where the trog poison and the assassin's blade had weakened him. But he didn't drop me. He held me against his chest like I was made of glass. Behind us, the slaver army, 500 men who had been ready to kill us 5 minutes ago, were on their knees. They had dropped their rifles. They stared at the golden corpse of the Baron, then at the warlord carrying the witch who had killed him. What about them? Zola asked, pausing at the tank's ladder. She gestured to the kneeling army. We can't fit them in the tank. Danton stopped. He turned slowly to face the sea of soldiers. He looked exhausted, covered in oil, blood, and bone dust, but he projected an aura of absolute, terrifying authority. You have a choice, Danton roared, his voice cracking but carrying over the wind. You can stay here and rot with your golden king, or you can march to Sector 4. The soldiers looked at each other. They were thirsty. Their lips were cracked, their eyes sunken. Sector 4 has water, Danton lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie anymore. Sector 4 has the tap. March and you drink. Run and I hunt you down. It wasn't a negotiation, it was an ultimatum. A lieutenant in the front row stood up. He unbuckled his water canteen, empty, and dropped it in the sand. We march, the lieutenant croaked. Danton nodded once. Then his strength seemed to waver. He stumbled, gripping me tighter. Get inside, he whispered to me, his face gray, before I fall over. He handed me up to Zola, who pulled me into the dark safety of the Leviathan's cabin. Danton followed, sealing the hatch behind him. The moment the lock clicked, Danton collapsed. He slid down the metal wall, his legs giving out. He hit the floor hard, gasping for air. Danton! I tried to crawl to him, but my limbs felt like lead. I'm fine, he wheezed, clutching his chest wound. Fresh blood was seeping through his bandage. Just drive. Zola, get us out of here. Rex is awake, Zola warned, jumping into the driver's seat. From the travel box strapped to the wall, a low, groggy croak emerged. Shiny man? Boom? Yes, Rex, I whispered, resting my head on the cool metal floor, staring at Danton across the cabin. The shiny man went boom. Chapter 22. The Long Drive Home. The drive back to Sector 4 was a blur of vibration and pain. Zola drove the Leviathan gently, avoiding the dunes, but every bump sent a spike of agony through my head. I lay on the floorboards, wrapped in a thermal blanket. Danton sat opposite me, leaning against the munitions locker. He had hooked himself up to the tank's emergency IV line, a saline drip meant for battlefield trauma. He watched me. His silver eyes tracked my every breath. You killed a warlord, he said softly. The silence in the cabin was thick. He was going to kill you, I murmured, my voice raspy. My throat felt raw, as if I had swallowed sand. You stopped his heart, Danton continued, his expression unreadable. You didn't touch him, you just squeezed. I pulled the blanket tighter. Are you afraid of me now, Danton? He paused. He looked at my hands, the hands that had blistered from healing him, the hands that had executed a tyrant. Fear is for prey, he said. I'm not prey, but the council, they will be terrified. He reached out, his hand spanning the distance between us. He touched my knee. Blood magic is a capital offense, Romy. If Orin finds out what you did, he won't just arrest you, he'll vivisect you. Let him try, I said, a flash of anger cutting through my exhaustion. I'll pop his brain like a grape. Danton smirked. It was a weak, tired smile, but it reached his eyes. You're a monster, he said affectionately. My monster. Your asset, I corrected. No, Danton shook his head. He unbuckled the IV line from his arm, though he clearly needed it. He crawled across the small space until he was sitting next to me. He leaned his head back against the wall, his shoulder pressing against mine. An asset is something you spend, he whispered, closing his eyes. I'm done spending you. We sat there in the dark, the engine humming beneath us. Rex scratched in his box, muttering about shinies and bugs. Zola hummed a tune in the front seat, trying to keep herself awake. I looked at Danton's profile. The sharp jawline, the scars, the sheer exhaustion etched into his face. He had fought a tank, an army, and a poison, all to keep his word. We have an army now, I whispered. 500 men marching behind us. 500 mouths, Danton corrected, keeping his eyes closed. Torian is going to kill me. We have the water, I reminded him. We have the mother lode. We have a hole in the ground, Danton said. Until we get the pumps running full capacity, we are vulnerable. The Baron is dead, but his sector isn't. His lieutenants will come for revenge. Then we fight them, I said, resting my head on his shoulder. He didn't push me away. He shifted, wrapping his arm around me, pulling me into the warmth of his body. Rest, Romy, he commanded softly. The war isn't over. It's just intermission. Chapter 23. The Integration. We arrived at the silo at dawn. The Leviathan looked like it had been chewed on by a dragon. The armor was scorched, the plow was bent, and the tracks were grinding. Zola parked it in the main courtyard, not the garage. When the hatch opened, the cool morning air of the scorch hit us. Torian was waiting. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He was flanked by the entire garrison of Sector 4, their weapons raised. They weren't aiming at us, they were aiming at the horizon. Behind the tank, a dust cloud was rising. The Baron's army. They had marched through the night, driven by the promise of water. 500 soldiers, disarmed, dusty, and desperate. Alpha, Torian said, his voice tight. Please tell me you didn't bring the entire Sector 5 invasion force home for dinner. Danton climbed down from the tank. He stumbled, his bad leg buckling, but he caught himself on the hull. He refused help. They aren't invasion force anymore, Torian, Danton rasped. They're refugees. We don't have the capacity, Torian hissed, gesturing to the crowd of ragged soldiers cresting the dune. Our filters are already redlining. Then build more filters, Danton ordered. He turned to the crowd. The Sector 5 soldiers stopped at the gate. They looked at the green vines on the silo walls. They smelled the moisture in the air. Some of them began to weep. Open the hydrants, Danton commanded. Alpha! Open them! Danton roared. Torian signaled the gate guards. They turned the heavy iron wheels of the external emergency valves. Water, clean, pressurized water from the newly tapped mother lode, sprayed out into the courtyard. It was a chaotic baptism. The soldiers rushed forward, not to fight, but to drink. They fell to their knees in the mud, cupping their hands, letting the water soak their uniforms. It was a scene of pure, primal relief. I climbed down from the tank, holding Rex's box. I watched them. You bought their loyalty, I said to Danton. Cheaper than you bought me. Danton wiped oil from his face. Water is the only currency that matters, Romy. They won't fight for a dead baron. They'll fight for the man who quenched their thirst. He looked at Torian. Process them, disarm them, integrate them into the labor force. Anyone who causes trouble gets exiled to the salt flats. And the Baron? Torian asked. Dead, Danton said simply. Romy handled it. Torian looked at me. His eyes widened. He saw the dried blood on my nose, the blisters on my hands. He looked at the massive, battle-scarred tank. Torian swallowed. You handled a warlord? He had a heart condition, I said flatly. Torian looked back at Danton. The Council is going to lose their minds. A sector leader dead? They'll send the Sky Fleet. Let them come, Danton said, putting a hand on my shoulder. We have water, we have an army, and we have a witch. Chapter 24. The Glass Ring. That night, the silo was celebrating. The integration was messy but peaceful. The Sector 5 soldiers were too grateful to be rebellious. They were eating protein mash and drinking their fill for the first time in years. I was in the Alpha Suite. I had showered, scrubbing the smell of the Bone Valley from my skin. I wore a clean gray tunic, my hair wet and loose. Danton was sitting on the edge of his bed. He had removed his shirt, revealing the fresh stitches on his side and the bruising from the fight. He was cleaning his kinetic pistol, the rhythmic click-clack of the slide, the only sound in the room. "How is the bird?" he asked, not looking up. "Rex is mad," I said, pointing to the corner where Rex was sulking on a perch Danton had built. His wing was still taped, but he was shredding a pillow with vengeance. "He wants a shiny for his trouble." Danton chuckled. He reached into his pocket. "Come here." I walked over. The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't the adrenaline of combat anymore. It was something heavier. Intimacy. Danton set the gun aside. He reached out and took my hand. His thumb brushed over my blistered palm. "I didn't have time to give you this before," he said quietly. "I was saving it for a victory." He pulled a small object from his pocket. It was a ring, but not metal. It was made of clear, reinforced glass. Inside the band, trapped in a vacuum bubble, was a single drop of blue liquid. "Glacial," I whispered, "from the well." "Pure," Danton said. "Unfiltered, the lifeblood of the silo." He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. The drop of water caught the light, shimmering like a jewel more precious than diamond. "Why?" I asked, my throat tight. "Because you found it," Danton said, looking into my eyes. "And because you stayed. You could have run in the valley, Romy. You could have taken the tank and left me to die." "I told you," I said, looking at the ring. "Salt in the wound." "Water in the blood," he finished. He didn't let go of my hand. He pulled me closer until I was standing between his knees. The heat of his body was comforting now, no longer a fever. "This ring is a symbol," he murmured, "to my men, to the sector. It means you aren't just a dowser, you aren't a slave." "What am I?" "You're the queen of the tap," he said seriously, "my equal." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against my stomach. I wove my fingers into his dark hair. "We have a lot of work to do, Danton," I whispered. "The Baron is gone, but the council—" "I know," he sighed. "But for tonight, we drink." He wasn't talking about water. Chapter 25, The Skyfleet Signal. The peace lasted exactly 12 hours. The next morning, I was in the mess hall with Zola and Rex. Rex was eating a piece of bacon I had stolen for him, looking smug. Zola was recounting her tank-driving heroics to a group of wide-eyed mechanics. "So I rammed the bone!" Zola shouted, waving a fork. "Crash! And the skiff went squish!" The room laughed. It was a good sound. Then the sirens wailed. Not the perimeter alarm, not the raid siren. This was a deep, resonant horn that vibrated the entire silo structure. It was a sound I had only heard once before, in childhood stories. The Sky Alert. "All hands to battle stations!" Torian's voice boomed over the intercom. "Alpha to the command deck immediately!" I grabbed Rex and ran. When I reached the command deck, Danton was already there. He was staring at the main view screen. The entire room was bathed in red emergency light. "Report," I said, breathless. "We're being hailed," Danton said grimly, "from orbit." He pointed to the screen. The image wasn't static. It was a live feed from a camera looking down on the silo from space. We looked like a tiny speck in the desert. Hovering above us, terrifyingly large, was the silhouette of a ship. A dreadnought, the flagship of the High Council. "They're not attacking," Torian said, his hands flying over the console. "They're broadcasting." "Put it on screen," Danton ordered. The map vanished. A face appeared. It was a man I had never seen, but I knew his name instantly. Everyone in the Scorch knew his face. Legislator Orin. He was pale, clean, and terrifyingly calm. He sat in a white room that looked like a clinic. "Alpha Danton," Orin's voice was smooth, processed by high-tech speakers. "And the anomaly." He looked directly at me. "We have received reports of a disturbance in Sector 5, Orin continued. "Warlord Baron is dead. His assets have been reappropriated. This is a violation of the treaty." Danton leaned over the console. "The Baron attacked me. I defended my territory." The council does not care about your squabbles, Oren smiled thinly. However, we do care about unauthorized magic. My heart stopped. We have satellite thermal imaging of the battle, Oren said. We saw the heat signatures shift. We saw the impossible. He leaned forward. You have 1 week, Danton. You have been summoned to the Apex Summit at the Spire. You will attend, and you will bring the girl. And if I refuse? Danton challenged. The camera view shifted. It zoomed out to show the belly of the dreadnought. A bay door opened. A massive tungsten rod loaded into a kinetic launcher pointed straight at the silo. Then we will sanitize the sector, Oren said softly. From orbit. The screen went black. The war room was silent. Danton looked at me. He looked at the ring on my finger. Well, Danton said, reaching for his cane. Pack your bags, Romy. We're going to the north. Chapter 26. The Iron Brace. Hold still, Zola hissed, the pneumatic drill in her hand whining like an angry hornet. If I drill into your shin bone, don't blame me. Danton gritted his teeth, his knuckles white as he gripped the edges of the medical table. Just do it, Zola. We were in the garage, preparing for the departure. The air smelled of ozone and anxiety. Above us, visible through the reinforced skylights, the council dreadnought hung in the sky, a sword of Damocles waiting to drop. I stood by Danton's head, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He refused painkillers. He said he needed to feel the fit. Zola finished the modification. She stepped back, wiping grease onto her jumpsuit. Okay, she said. Stand up. Danton slid off the table. His left leg, crushed by the Juggernaut's piston only days ago, was now encased in a brutal, industrial exoskeleton. It wasn't sleek council tech. It was scorch tech. Black steel rods, hydraulic pistons salvaged from the Leviathan's spare parts, and a heavy battery pack strapped to his thigh. He put weight on it. Whir, click. The hydraulics engaged, hissing as they took the load off his shattered bone. Danton stood tall, the grimace of pain smoothing into a look of focus. He took a step. Clank. Another. Clank. He didn't limp. He marched. But it was mechanical, heavy, and loud. It works, Danton grunted. He reached out, grabbing his cane, a heavy rod of titanium, for balance. It's ugly, Zola critiqued, tapping the metal with her wrench, but it will punch a hole through a brick wall if you kick hard enough. Good, Danton said. He looked at me. Is the tank loaded? The Leviathan is secured on the flatbed, I confirmed. We're taking the heavy hauler. Zola drives. We ride in the cab. Rex is unhappy about the travel arrangements. Rex can file a complaint with HR, Danton muttered. He walked, clank, clank, toward the bay doors. The sound of his new leg was a constant reminder of the price we had paid for the water. Outside, the convoy was ready. We weren't taking an army, just the hauler, the tank, and us. Torian stood by the truck, looking like he was about to vomit from stress. Alpha, Torian said, handing Danton a datapad. I've locked the silo. The dead man's switch is active. If I don't input the clearance code every 24 hours, the pumps reverse and flood the desert. Scorched earth, Danton nodded, taking the pad. Don't let Korg drink all the reserve while I'm gone. Korg is currently teaching the refugees how to play poker, Torian sighed. Come back alive, Danton. Please. Danton looked at the massive silo, at the green vines climbing the walls, at the soldiers patrolling the ramparts. He had built this from dust. Now, he was leaving it to save it. He turned to me. He touched the glass ring on my finger. Ready to go into the lion's den, Romy? I checked the heavy kinetic pistol at my hip. I looked up at the dreadnought in the sky. Let's go break some teeth, I said. We climbed into the massive cab of the hauler. Zola fired the engine. With a roar of diesel and defiance, we rolled out of the gates, heading north, toward the ice, toward the council. Chapter 27. The Thermal Line. We drove for 2 days without stopping. The scenery shifted slowly, agonizingly, from the familiar orange dust of the scorch to a hard gray slate. Inside the cab of the hauler, the mood was tense. Zola drove with focused intensity. Danton sat in the passenger seat, his mechanical legs stretched out, cleaning his gun. I sat on the sleeper bunk behind them, Rex curled into a ball of feathers inside my jacket. Temperature is dropping, Zola announced, tapping the dashboard thermometer. We're at 50 degrees, and falling. We're crossing the thermal line, Danton said without looking up. The council calls it the civilization boundary. I call it the freeze. I've never seen snow, I whispered, looking out the window. The horizon was changing. A white line stretched across the world, sharp as a knife cut. On one side, gray dust. On the other, blinding white. It's not natural, Danton explained, sensing my unease. The Spire uses atmospheric condensers to suck the heat out of the air to power their city. They literally steal the warmth from the world to keep their lights on. As the massive truck crossed the invisible line, the world changed instantly. Frost bloomed on the windshield in fractal patterns. The heater in the cab groaned, struggling to keep up. The air outside turned a milky, opaque white as snow began to hammer against the glass. It's beautiful, I breathed. It's dead, Danton countered. He shivered, a subtle tremor running through his broad shoulders. I realized then what this meant for him. He was a wolf, a creature of the sun and heat. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was contrary to his biology. Rex poked his head out of my jacket. He took one look at the white world outside, let out a terrified squawk, and buried himself back in my armpit. Cold! Death! No! Smart bird, Danton muttered. He reached for his heavy military coat, black wool with a fur collar, and pulled it on. Zola, watch the road. The ice is black here. If we jackknife with the tank on the back, we're done. I got it, boss, Zola said, though her grip on the wheel tightened. It's slippery, like driving on oil. I moved from the bunk to the space between the seats. I reached out and placed my hand on Danton's shoulder. Through the thick wool, he felt tense, like a coiled spring. You okay? I asked softly. He looked at me. His silver eyes were duller in the gray light. My leg aches, he admitted, rubbing the metal brace. The hydraulic fluid gets sluggish in the cold. I'll be slower up there, Romy. You're not slow, I said, squeezing his shoulder. You're just heavy. He smirked, covering my hand with his. Heavy is good. Heavy holds the ground. The truck rumbled on, pushing deeper into the white void. The scorch was behind us. We were in the predator's territory now. Chapter 28. The Dampeners. Night in the north wasn't like night in the scorch. In the desert, the stars were sharp diamonds. Here, the sky was a suffocating blanket of heavy gray clouds, illuminated from below by a faint, unnatural glow on the horizon. The Spire. We were 50 miles out. Danton suddenly gasped, dropping his water bottle. He grabbed his head, his fingers digging into his scalp. Danton? I was at his side instantly. What is it? The hum, he gritted out, his jaw clenched tight. Can't you hear it? I don't hear anything. The dampeners, Zola whispered from the driver's seat. He warned us about them. Danton leaned forward, resting his forehead on the dashboard. He was sweating, despite the freezing cabin. It's a frequency, he rasped. Broadcast from the Spire. It targets the lichen cortex. It suppresses the urge. The wolf? I asked. The instincts, he corrected. The speed, the sensory input. It's like someone just turned off half my brain. I feel blind. He looked up at me. The molten silver in his eyes had faded to a flat, steel gray. He looked human, terrifyingly human. They do this to control the warlords, Danton said, his voice sounding hollow. When we enter the city, I won't be an alpha, Romy. I'll just be a man with a broken leg. I took his face in my hands. His skin was cold. You are Danton, I said fiercely. You killed the Juggernaut. You saved the silo. You don't need the wolf to be dangerous. I need the wolf to protect you, he whispered, looking at the ring on my finger. Oren knows what you are. If I can't fight... Then I fight, I said. I have the pistol. I have the magic. The dampeners might block you too, he warned. We don't know how it affects blood witches. I closed my eyes. I reached out with the sense. Salt in the wound. It was harder here. The cold numbed the world, but I pushed through. I felt the diesel pumping in the truck's engine. I felt Zola's anxious heartbeat, and I felt the fluid in Danton's mechanical leg. Thick, cold oil. I can still feel. I opened my eyes. It's heavy, like wading through mud, but I can feel the water. Danton let out a ragged breath. He leaned into my touch. Good, he murmured, because when we cross that perimeter, you might be the only weapon we have left. Zola downshifted. The engine roared. Checkpoint ahead, she announced. Get your game faces on. We're knocking on the door. Chapter 29. The Needle. The spire appeared out of the snowstorm like a hallucination. It wasn't a city, it was a monolith. A single, needle-thin tower of white ceramic and glass that pierced the clouds, rising 200 stories into the frozen sky. It sat in the center of a perfectly circular frozen lake, surrounded by a defensive wall of blue energy fields. Everything was white. Pristine, sterile, blinding white. It looks like a hospital, Zola muttered, slowing the truck as we approached the massive energy gate. Or a morgue. It's both, Danton said, adjusting his coat. He grabbed his cane, a thick rod of black titanium he'd scavenged from the Leviathan's axle. He sat up straighter, masking his pain behind a mask of arrogant boredom. A squad of guards in white kinetic armor stepped out of the guardhouse. They didn't look like the dusty, rugged soldiers of the Scorch. They looked like robots. Halt! The lead guard commanded, his voice amplified. State your business. Zola rolled down the window. The freezing air rushed in, biting my face. Alpha Danton of Sector 4, Danton called out from the passenger seat. Here for the summit. Orin sent an invitation, or a threat, depending on how you read it. The guard scanned the truck, his helmet tilted up, looking at the massive, battle-scarred tank strapped to the flatbed behind us. We were not informed of heavy armor, the guard said. It's my mobility scooter, Danton deadpanned, tapping his metal leg. I have a disability. The guard hesitated. He touched his earpiece, likely checking with Central. After a long pause, the blue energy field flickered and died. Proceed to Hangar 7, the guard ordered. Weapons remain in the vehicle. Sure, Danton lied. He touched the pistol hidden inside his coat. We drove through the gates. The transition was jarring. Inside the walls, the snow stopped. The ground was heated from below, keeping the pavement dry and black. The air was filtered. We drove past towering domes and walkways where people in gray silk robes walked with their heads down. They didn't look at us. They looked terrified. It's quiet, I whispered. Too quiet. Oppression is silent, Danton said, his eyes scanning the rooftops for snipers. In the Scorch, we scream to survive. Here, they whisper to stay alive. We pulled into Hangar 7. It was a cavernous white space. As soon as the engine died, a team of white-clad technicians swarmed the truck. Don't let them touch the tank, Danton ordered Zola. Stay with the Leviathan. If they try to board it, lock it down. You got it, boss, Zola said, grabbing a wrench. Danton opened the door. His mechanical leg whirred, hiss-clank, as he stepped down onto the polished floor. He leaned heavily on his cane. Ready? He asked me. I climbed down beside him, smoothing the front of my gray tunic. I felt the weight of the pistol at my hip, hidden under the fabric. Ready, I said. The doors at the far end of the hangar slid open. Legislator Orin walked in. He wasn't on a screen this time. He was real. Tall, pale, and smelling of lavender and antiseptic. Danton, Orin smiled, his eyes cold as ice. And the siren. Welcome to the Spire. You're late. Chapter 30. The Glass Cage. Traffic was murder, Danton said dryly, limping forward. Clank! Step! Clank! Orin's eyes dropped to Danton's leg brace. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. I see the rumors were true, Orin said softly. The wolf is wounded. The wolf is annoyed, Danton corrected. We're here, Orin. What's the game? No game. Orin spread his hands. A summit. A gathering of peers to discuss the future of the resources. Your tank, however, he gestured to the Leviathan, will remain here. Impounded for safety protocols. My driver stays with it, Danton said instantly. If you insist, Oren shrugged. The hangar is heated. She might get bored, but she won't freeze. He turned his gaze to me. Up close, Oren was terrifying. His skin was poreless, likely bioengineered. His eyes were a pale, watery blue that seemed to look right through my clothes to the blood beneath. And you, Oren purred, stepping into my personal space. The anomaly. I didn't flinch. I held his gaze. My name is Romy. Of course, Oren smiled. We have prepared quarters for you, the Apex suite. You will want to rest before the first session tomorrow. We're keeping our weapons, Danton said, moving his cane to block Oren's path to me. Of course, Oren laughed lightly. We are civilized here, Danton. We don't strip search warlords, unless they give us a reason. He snapped his fingers. 2 drones floated down from the ceiling, their cameras glowing red. Escort our guests to the top floor. We followed the drones. We took a glass elevator that shot up the side of the spire. The view was dizzying. The frozen lake, the white wasteland, the tiny black dot of our truck below. The elevator opened into a suite that was more glass than wall. It was luxurious, filled with white leather furniture and silk drapes. But I saw the truth immediately. There were no handles on the windows. The door had a heavy magnetic lock. It's a cage, I whispered, as the door slid shut behind us, locking with a definitive thud. Danton limp-walked to the window. He tapped the glass with his cane. It made a dull, heavy sound. Reinforced polymer, he muttered. Bulletproof. Bomb-proof. He turned to me. The strain of the dampeners was visible on his face. He looked exhausted, his movements jerky. Check the room, he ordered softly. Bugs. Cameras. I closed my eyes. I reached out with the sense. I felt the electric hum of microphones in the lamps. I felt the pulse of a camera behind the mirror. Everywhere, I said, opening my eyes. They're watching everything. Danton nodded grimly. He walked over to the bed, a massive white platform, and sat down, unstrapping his heavy leg brace. He winced as the metal detached from his scarred skin. Then let's give them a show, he said, loud enough for the microphones. I'm taking a shower. You order room service. And Romy? He looked at me, his eyes hard. Don't take off the ring. I touched the glass band on my finger. Never. We were in the belly of the beast, and the beast was hungry. The auction was just the beginning. We are trapped in the spire, and the council thinks they've won. They think they can take what they want. But they forgot one thing. You don't corner a wolf unless you're ready to die. Danton isn't paying with water anymore. He's paying with war. Click here to watch the finale. They chained me to a table to drain my blood. The Alpha flooded their city and said, "Drink until you drown." Part 2.